Shut up, Evan. Shut up, Evan. Shut up, Evan.
I just have so many things I could talk to you about, both about your very interesting life, but then I also could just throw subjects at you that I want your opinion about, which makes you an especially interesting person to interview.
You'll see.
Do you like being interviewed?
I'm a monologuist. I went to this party and for Document Magazine, and they sat me next to Fran Lebowitz, and it was just so uncomfortable. And I said to him afterwards, never sit two monologuists next to each other. We really didn't know how to communicate at all.
Yeah, you need a listener.
Yes.
Was that an enjoyable dinner, though?
Yeah, it was for those sort of things, I'm not really huge on those.
Yeah.
But it was right next door to Joe's Pub. I was dressed up. I went over.
Now, you were once described by The New Yorker as the best cabaret artist of their generation. You are that, obviously. You are a performance artist, a singer, a songwriter, an actor, a visual artist, an author, a painter, an MC, and so much more. I would consider you really the consummate multi-hyphenate. Really, though, I'm curious, when you are meeting people and they say, "What do you do?" How do you like to respond?
I say I'm a singer. And I studied theater because when I was trying to decide what to major in, I knew I was a really good artist. I knew I could sing and I liked music. But I thought my weakest link was acting. And, as it turns out, that's my least favorite thing to do. And then I also decided that I really prefer hanging out with musicians more than hanging out with actors. And so that also had a lot to do with it, too, because I love hanging out with musicians.
What draws you to musicians as opposed to actors? And perhaps what is it about actors that makes you say, I want to hang with the musicians?
Musicians just see the world in a different way than actors do. Like the way they use their brain, the way they put ideas together. I don't know. Actors, I think, are so much more self-conscious than musicians. And so I just feel a little bit more relaxed around them.
I wonder if there's something around the fact that, acting is, at its core, a craft.
Right.
And music is, there's not really a craft of how to be a musician. There's less of a rubric.
Well, acting is about kind of finding some way to convince people you're something other than yourself, which I didn't really realize when I first thought I wanted to be an actor, because I didn't like my life. I didn't want to be myself. So the idea of being someone else appealed to me. And then as I got older and I realized that, I really just wanted to be free to be myself, then acting just didn't really appeal to me as much. And I wasn't really interested in going to auditions and trying to figure out how other people would want me to be so that they'd cast me in this role. Mostly roles I didn't want anyway. But yeah, musicians just seemed a lot more low-key. I mean, crazy too, but I like crazy.
Yeah, I like crazy too. Let me ask you about someone I know that you have a great amount of reverence for, Joan Didion. Joan Didion, from my understanding, has always been a meaningful figure in your life. You were 15 when you first read her novel, Play It As It Lays. What did that book mean to you at the time?
Well, at that time, I was so obsessed with L.A. I grew up, when I was a kid, I just wanted to be a movie star or a TV star. I didn't even really know what that meant, but I knew that you had to be in LA to do it. I also come from this family where, there's people, my mother had 8 brothers and sisters. She was one of 9. One of my uncles was a millionaire, and one of my uncles was constantly asking my mom if he could borrow $10, and she'd say, "No, you can't borrow it. Just take it. I don't want to be expecting you to give it back. I don't want to hear the excuses. Just take it and let's forget about it." And so I had this variety of people, but obviously the one that lived in California that was friends with Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett had the appeal to me. And so I was in love with LA, and then I read Play It As It Lays, which is this kind of book about spiritual nihilism in a way, and about vacancy, and about nothing matters. Well, when I was so stressed out and unhappy as a queer high school student, having somebody say nothing matters really made me feel better. I was like, you know what? Nothing matters. I don't care. I'll just get through this. The way she writes is so spare. I was always, everything was so overblown or dramatic or whatever, and I just like that complete coolness of her writing, because I didn't feel that way at all. I felt so emotionally turbulent that the clarity of her sentences was beautiful to me.
When you finally landed in LA for the first time, did you feel this sense of, I finally achieved this purpose that I set out for myself?
Well, we went to LA to visit my uncle when I was 10, I think. And they put us in, my uncle lived in Calabasas.
This is the millionaire uncle.
Mm-hmm. And we weren't allowed to go to his house because he had a wife and kids in California that we didn't, my parents knew about, but most of the family didn't know about, because the wife and kids in New York didn't know that he had a wife and kids in LA, and the wife in LA thought she was married to him, but I don't think she was married. It was a whole thing. He was a real, as my pappy would say, a condeister, He was an interesting person, but I just loved being in LA. I just felt like Sandy Duncan because she was my favorite TV star at the time. So I was like, yeah, I just felt great.
You mentioning Sandy Duncan has given me a natural transition to my next question, but I have to pause to say, I'm just so enraptured in everything you say. You have a quality about you that makes me inherently just want to listen to you. And I'm just wondering, do you feel like you've always possessed that quality? It almost feels like you, to my mind, put people under a spell a little bit.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to my friend Marcia the other day. She was visiting me upstate. And, I guess I have. I don't know that I was particularly aware of it, but I remember in second grade, Mr. Magruder, who was the teacher in the next classroom, they were putting a Christmas show together, and he came up to me and said, I would like for you to sing a solo in the Christmas show. And I was so surprised, why me? And so, I got up there and sang just what makes that little old ant think he can move that rubber tree plant. He's got high hopes. He just asked me to do that. Now, looking back on it, I can see that Mr. Magruder probably was a little light in the loafers, and I appreciate that he was an ally. And then when I was in fourth grade, we had this substitute teacher who I just thought was mean. And when my mom came in for Parents' Day, she said, that kid's going to be a star someday. And I was like, where did that come from? All throughout elementary school, they put kids in desks in a horseshoe shape around the teacher or whatever, or rows. And I would always be sitting completely separate from the rest of the classroom, which I don't even think bothered me. But my mom would come in for Parents' Day and see my desk separated from the rest of the classroom, and she would get upset. And I guess it was because, I just would get interested in something and space out, or I don't know why. But then, as I was telling my friend Marcia the other day, in eighth grade, I think, I'm a talker. And so she put me next, the teacher put me next to this girl who was very, very quiet. She was painfully shy. And so she thought, that girl never talks, so who are they going to have to talk to, I would be quiet next to her. Well, I started just entertaining her, making her laugh, engaging her in conversation, and she just blossomed, And my mom told me a couple years ago, before my mom died, she was at the grocery store, and that girl's mother came up to her, and she said that her daughter sitting next to me in that grade completely changed her life. It sort of makes me want to cry, because it just made her feel like she was seen. She had a great sense of humor. She was really funny. And she grew up to be a very cool girl. But at that moment, me and my big mouth just sort of helped her find herself. And that really touched me, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that I don't think about because I'm just myself.
I understand. So your early loves include Vivian Lee, Jane Fonda, and Vanessa Redgrave.
Yes.
What was it about these women that you connected with at such an early age?
Well, my cousin came to babysit me, and I was obsessed with Barbies, and I wasn't allowed to play with Barbies, but she was the babysitter, so she brought her Barbies with her, contraband. She smuggled them in, and some fabric. And she decided she was going to make a halter dress for Barbie while I was playing with Barbies. And while we were doing that, we were watching Mary Queen of Scots, starring Vanessa Redgrave on, TV. And I just thought she was the most beautiful thing. And I might have been like 8 or 9, and I had just recently heard about reincarnation. So I decided I was the reincarnation of Mary Queen of Scots. So I just started reading everything there was to be about Mary Queen of Scots, and I was like, oh, she grew up in France, so she spoke French. So I started speaking French to people.
Your native tongue.
My native tongue. And then I got a French-English dictionary, and I'd look up French and English words, and I'd be like, she spoke the old French. So it's not the same language they use now. It was a different, in the 1500s, it was completely different. So I convinced myself that I could speak French, but, I don't at this point really think I was the reincarnation of Mary Queen of Scots, but I was obsessed with Vanessa Redgrave. Then I saw Julia, which was the movie where Jane Fonda played Lillian Hellman, and it was all about the communist witch hunt in the 1950s, the McCarthy era. And I saw that movie 3 times a week it came out, and I think that had a profound effect on me. And also Eartha Kitt being on talk shows talking about how she was blacklisted for speaking up against the Vietnam War, and in the White House to Lady Bird Johnson. And I just thought these women that spoke up and said their truth to power were the most amazing kind of people you could be. And then when I met Eartha Kitt many years later, I told her, I was like, if I have one thing to say to her when I meet her, what am I going to say? And I said, thank you. Seeing you on those shows when I was young taught me that you can be both glamorous and political. And that was the right thing to say, because she went to lunch with us the next day, and I spent the whole afternoon with her, which was incredible.
Wow. You've had the opportunity to meet a number of your idols, and obviously there's the old adage, don't meet your idols. I, too, have met some of my idols, and they've lived up to what I wanted them to be. And I get the sense that might have been the case for you as well in many instances. Are you ultimately a proponent of meet your idols?
Yes. There's only one idol I haven't met that I can think of right off the top of my head, which is Joni Mitchell. Whether I meet Joni Mitchell or not isn't that big of a deal to me, but she is one that I haven't met. The first time I met Patti Smith, I was so blown away by her. She was doing the Meltdown Festival in London, and Tilda Swinton was a part of it, and Tilda and I were friends. So after this thing, we went back to the hotel where Tilda was staying with Patti. So we're on this sort of like honesty bar, hanging out. And I start talking to Patti, right? And I'm talking to her about Benjamin Smoke, who I cover a lot of his songs. And one of my standards in my holiday show is Somebody's House Always Burns at Christmas. So we start talking about Benjamin Smoke, and we start talking about, the era where everybody was dying of AIDS, and we're having this amazing conversation. And I was like, would you excuse me for 1 minute? And I went into the bathroom and I started bawling because I couldn't believe that I was having this amazing conversation with Patti Smith. And then I smacked myself in the face and said, pull yourself together and go back out there and talk to Patti Smith. And so I had the most amazing experience with Patti Smith, and I've met her many times since then, and she's just been as cold as ice. And I'm like, well, maybe if I had Tilda Swinton next to me, she'd still be nice. But I think Patti Smith is a genius,
Another one of your idols, or obsessions rather, is Edie Sedgwick. You actually own one of her leopard skin pillbox hats. Of course you do. That very hat is believed to have inspired Bob Dylan's song Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat. In 2018, in a story for the New York Times, you recounted a party during your sophomore year at Adelphi University in which you went as Edie Sedgwick. You called it, quote, your first coming out as a queer cross-dresser, if you will, end quote. What do you recall of that night?
I was so fascinated by Edie Sedgwick. When I worked at the bookstore in the mall in my hometown, Gene Stein's book, Edie, an American Biography, came in, and I was just like, what is this? You know, I didn't even know that much about Andy Warhol at the time. I mean, I had seen pictures of Viva, and I was kind of obsessed with her because she had those kind of same sort of eyelids like Greta Garbo. And so I was aware of the superstars, but I got this book and I read it, and, you know, it was such a tragic story, but she was so unbelievably glamorous. And when you're young, you don't really register that tragedy seems romantic to you. It doesn't seem like, oh, this is a horrible, sad story. It wasn't until years later, because I was like, I want to be just like Edie Sedgwick. Well, I didn't want to die at 28 of a drug overdose face down in a pillow, even though I can think of worse ways to die than relaxing yourself to death. But she was so fabulous, and I decided I was going to be Edie Sedgwick that night. And when I go into character, I'm into characters. So I went to this party with all these upperclassmen, and they were all tripping, which I wasn't doing, but I can, you know, vibe on people's vibes. So I was pretending I was tripping, and I was like, let's all get in the shower. So I had all these people just get into the shower and turn off the water. But of course, I jumped out before they turned the water on. But I realized, you know, you can be very powerful if you're convincing enough. And so it was really fun. I mean, I was popular after that.
We're talking about so many women. I mean, Eartha Kitt, you know, Patti Smith, Edie Sedgwick, etc. And I'm wondering what something all these women have in common is fame. And I'm wondering how alluring the idea of fame was to you before you had it.
I knew about them because they were famous. But I knew a lot of amazing women that weren't famous, you know. And my character, Kiki, was based on my friend's mother, who was not famous. She was a burlesque dancer in Baltimore in the 50s, and she was an incredible woman. She terrified me. But I was also completely fascinated by her because she was one of those people who's been around so much that you feel that she can look into you and see all of your bullshit. And I just felt completely naked in front of her, and it made me so uncomfortable. All the things that I didn't like about myself, you know, being this like liar, basically, because I was raised to lie about who and what I was. So I was just living a lie. And I felt like whether she could see it or not didn't matter to me. I just felt like she could see it. So then I felt exposed to myself. But there were just all kinds of amazing women. There was this woman, Dorothy Hutzel, who was the janitor at my church growing up. And she was so great to all of us kids, but she was our Sunday school teacher also, and she was also an alcoholic. Like, they'd go in and they'd find her, she'd be cleaning the church, and she'd be passed out under the pews. Well, that's not right. Dorothy can't just fall asleep in the church like that. And so when we'd have Sunday school, she just let us talk, and I would lead the conversation about, oh, God, last night I can hear my parents having sex. And everyone's like, ooh, and did you ever hear your parents having sex? And then I'd watch Saturday Night Live, and I'd come in, and most of the kids weren't allowed to stay up that late. So I had a really good memory then. So I'd go in and I'd like do Gilda Radner's monologues for everybody. So Dorothy was great. So I just loved women like that were really sort of social outcasts and that were judged by people like my mom and, you know, good Christian ladies. And I found them to be the most wonderful, magical people to be around because I wasn't around people that don't judge you that often. And so I've always known amazing women. But the famous women are the people you can really talk about because people have a reference.
Yeah. We talked about LA and this love for LA that you had when you were a child. But when I think of you, I think of New York. Talk to me about the first time you arrived here, and did you have a similar idea of what New York was in contrast to the idea you had of LA?
I did, but I would say that my idea of New York lived up to itself more than my idea. LA is not that glamorous of a place to be. It's beautiful, but, you know, New York, in its way, even the people that aren't rich are somehow glamorous because they have managed to survive in this crazy town. And when I came here for the first time to start college was 1981. And my father brought me when I was looking at schools, and he took me to my first Broadway show, which was The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And then I asked him to take me to see Lolita, which was this play starring Donald Sutherland and Blanche Baker, who had been on the TV series Holocaust, and she was Carol Baker's daughter. Well, it was the most rotten show. It closed after 5 nights. It was, about this like old pedophile and this girl, and they were the only two, I think, they're the only two people I remember in the show. My father was disgusted by it. He thought it was the most awful thing, and I, being this like pretentious young queen, got in this big argument. Like, my father didn't know anything, and and then of course it got the most rancid reviews and closed right away. That was my first time in New York. And then my best girlfriend, when I started college, she went to Studio 54 all the time. So I just started going to 54 when I was 18 years old. And so New York nightlife was New York nightlife. It was Studio 54. I'd read about it in People magazine. So it was the New York that I had fantasized about. And I wasn't afraid. And I couldn't understand why all the other people in my school weren't going into the city every weekend to like experience it. We did this thing where we would second act shows. So I saw the second act of 42nd Street umpteen times. But my friend also knew Geraldine Page, the great actress, and she was doing Agnes of God on Broadway. And so she let us come multiple times. We could just go for free. And then we'd go backstage afterward and talk to Geraldine. But I saw it with her. I saw it with Amanda Plummer, who got the Tony for it. She was incredible. She was so good that when, that play where this girl thinks she's, been impregnated by God, and the nun and the psychiatrist are both like fighting for to discover which is the truth. And so when Amanda Plummer played it, she was so ethereal that she had me convinced that God knocked her up, And then the next actress that came in wasn't as good, and I was like, oh, she's lying. But Elizabeth Ashley played the psychiatrist, and she was great the first few times I saw it. Then the Tony nominations came out, and she was nominated. She's like, just like eating up the scenery. I was like, oh my God, this is what a Tony nomination does to you, because she and Geraldine were both nominated. Anyway, so then she left the show, and Diane Carroll came in, and I saw it again, and I was like, oh my God, Diane Carroll was so much better than Elizabeth Ashley. And anyway, it was a great experience to see the dynamics of a show change just simply by the personality of the actresses that were involved playing the same parts.
Oh, it's one of the best things about Broadway.
Yeah.
You mentioned Studio 54, and I know nightlife was a big, is nightlife a big part of your life today?
I don't go to clubs as much as I used to, but I would say it is. And, I went to Julio's Halloween party last week, and it was so much fun to be there. Nightlife isn't, and I know that this is going to sound like, I'm not saying back in the day, because everything goes through periods, and I also am aware that I'm 62 as opposed to 22. But I feel like there's like this mystical nightlife scenario that's happening in Brooklyn that I don't really know about 100%, but I live in Manhattan now. Manhattan used to be where all the mystical night spaces were, and as far as I'm aware, there aren't any.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
I'm often surprised when I hear about where the cool people are going out, and it's kind of the same 1, 2, 3 places. And I'm like, for a city this large with so many glamorous people, I'm surprised by how consolidated the cool places.
But there's not 1,000 people there dancing and doing drugs and having the time of their life like there used to be.
Yeah.
I felt very lucky because I never had to wait in line to go to Studio 54 because I had an in and I had a gold card. I'd just flash it. This is after Steve Rubell. But then I was at the opening night of Limelight, which was an incredible experience. And then I was at the opening night of the Palladium. Now, the Palladium was run by Ian Schrager and Steve Rubell. So they had the Mike Todd room, which was the VIP area. And I went to Mick Jagger's birthday party there. I saw Boy George. I saw Marilyn at Area, who was going to be this big star and was so fucked up they destroyed their career in one fell swoop. But yes, so I went to all these amazing clubs, and then when I went to London, I went to amazing nightclubs. And by the time I went to London to go back to school a second time in London in 2004, New York wasn't nearly as fun. London, I would go and I would dance, but I never danced in New York in those days. But I was working in clubs at that time and doing an awful lot of blows, so I was probably in the bathroom most of the time.
You mentioned, Limelight and Area and all of these, these bygone clubs of back in the day, right? And sure, there is a cyclical nature to nightlife as there is to so much of life, upturns, downturns.
Yes, and I had a great time at Julio's party, and I thought it gave me that feeling.
Mm-hmm. The location where Limelight used to be, which was 14th Street, is now an NYU dorm. And I think that says a lot about the evolution of this city, for better or for worse, you decide. Did you have any reaction to that as sort of any kind of sense of where the city was turning?
Well, that was Giuliani. I mean, you had two things. You had the gay population, Steve Rubell himself. Those people from like the time I graduated in college in 1985 till I came back in 1994. I had been in San Francisco in the meantime. So the people that went to the clubs, a lot of the gay people, they were sick or had died. And Giuliani made an attack on destroying nightlife in Manhattan. He was out to, turn all of those big spaces into real estate. And in order to make them a higher tax bracket, you couldn't have prostitutes or club kids or whatever, on your street if you wanted to put in fancy condos. So they outlawed all the stripper bars. They harassed them until they had to close the gay clubs, the big mainstream clubs. So it was actually a culture war upon our people, and there weren't as many people left to fight it, and so it just slowly everything disappeared. But it was not our fault. It was a war against us.
Yeah.
And now look at Giuliani.
I was just gonna say, it's remarkable.
America's mayor.
Some people get to live so many iterations of life, and so it's funny. Many people will think of Giuliani in the present tense of who this man is today and the evil that he is, but there's an evil that he was.
Yes, he was a powerful evil man then. Now he's just a big-mouthed drunk evil man. And at that point we knew Trump was an evil man too. I mean, there wasn't a moment when I didn't think, he destroyed the Bonwit Teller store. He destroys things of beauty. He doesn't have it, and then puts up something tacky because that's his idea. I don't know what movie he saw that was like, that's glamour. I'm gonna make that. Like, for his aesthetic sense alone, he should have been shot many years ago.
Don't disagree. Another famous person who you have occupied space with is Madonna. You performed, transition from Giuliani to Trump to Madonna.
Well, none of them are that pleasant.
Okay, well, I was going to ask, you performed at Madonna's 40th birthday.
39.
39.
Mm-hmm.
She would like that correction, especially. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like?
It was not pleasant, but it was also a very traumatic situation because her brother Christopher invited Kiki and her to play at her party, and it was initially supposed to be at Gianni Versace's mansion in Miami, and then he was assassinated. And so they had to decide whether they were going to still have the party, which they did, but instead of having it in Miami, they had it in LA. And I was like, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it or not, but I was like, okay, I'll do it if you put me and my boyfriend and Kenny and his boyfriend, and we each have hotel rooms at the Chateau Marmont, because I dreamed of staying at the Chateau Marmont. And you have to give us this certain amount of money, and you have to fly us business class. And they were like, they were trying to tell us they couldn't give us this amount of money. And I was like, well, then I won't come. I don't care. We can only get you a room at the Mondrian. I don't want to stay at the Mondrian. You can't tell me that Madonna can't get me a room at the Chateau Marmont. So thank goodness I negotiated a deal that I was happy with. And then we got out there, and the night of her party, I walk in. They introduced me to her before, and I, met her. Hi. And so Jackie Beat and I were performing. So I came out, and I'm walking onto the stage, and I set my drink down on the first table. And all of a sudden, this guy hauls back his foot and kicks me in the leg with his boot heel. So I was like, it was bleeding. And my adrenaline is now going through the roof because I've just been physically assaulted on my way to the stage. But I'm like, got to do this show for Madonna, right? So I do the show, and I'm performing, and she goes, sing a happy song. And I was like, all right, sweetheart, this next song, it doesn't start out happy, but I assure you it's ultimately redemptive. And so I did this medley. And then she goes, that wasn't very happy. And I said, listen, sweetheart, because Kiki's supposed to be in her 60s. When you get to be my age, if you can sing your chirpy, happy little songs, more power to you. But in the meantime, I've brought you a gift. And I gave her a bottle of Canadian Club whiskey. And I said, it's gotten me through the twilight years of my show business career. And I hope it helps get you through yours. And I gave her this whiskey. And, I think it is what's getting her through the twilight years of her show business career, the hooch.
If you were asked to perform at another Madonna birthday down the line, is there any world in which you would say yes?
No, because I don't think she's a nice person.
Fair enough.
And my friend, the guy that kicked me was D'Angelo, who had just was about to become a big star, and she was trying to get with D'Angelo that night. And my boyfriend overheard her say, oh, honey, don't let that scary drag queen get to you. And I was like, Madonna, But she was an ally, publicly.
You've lived a lot of life.
It's true. And I still love the music I listen to Madonna. The only record I had was Bedtime Stories. And when I got back from LA, I just threw it out the window.
Wow. I want to talk to you about the film Shortbus. It's incredibly important to me because it almost reminds me of what you were talking about, your experience with Joan Didion. I feel like I had that with the work of John Cameron Mitchell. Mm-hmm. Of course, Hedwig, but also Shortbus. I feel like Hedwig sort of captured the zeitgeist, and Shortbus was the thing that followed up that didn't quite get the attention that I felt it deserved.
Right.
For people that don't know, Shortbus is this incredible film. It assembles a group of actors together. It takes place during a New York City blackout. And most famously, I would say, the film features unsimulated sex. Mm-hmm. And I was recently at a party where I was speaking with John Cameron Mitchell, and I said to him, Shortbus 2? And he said to me, unfortunately, the film couldn't be made today. And I responded by saying, well, the original film couldn't be made then. I'm wondering if you can recall the conversations with John in which he wanted to bring you into this and how it was explained to you and just what that experience of making that film was like.
He wanted me to play Justin Bond because I didn't have the Vivian at that point. And I had been Kiki for so many years, and I was really over it at that point. And so I was like, okay, great, because I thought, I was a nightclub hostess and I loved doing it. And that's how I developed my audience, by just, getting on stage and mouthing off on the microphone. And so I thought, okay, great. And my boyfriend at the time, Sammy Joe, was a DJ. So Sammy was going to be the DJ in Shortbus. And then I went to school to do my MA in London. And then they were filming it. So I came back. But by then I'd broken up with Sammy Joe and been through 2 other boyfriends at that point. And they weren't DJs. It was great because I knew everybody. It was real. You know what I mean? The relationships were real. The place was real. we were being versions of ourselves that were really pretty close to real. But I think it was extremely liberating, because this is also coming after, like, the generation after AIDS. So it was sex positive, and that was really important at that time, because sex is supposed to be fun. Sex is supposed to be something that you enjoy. The reason we're queer is because we want to have sex with people that we're told we're not supposed to have sex with, and when we do, we enjoy it. And so that, I think, was a very liberating film for a lot of people.
I'm going to ask more about that, but I'm going to sidetrack to something that you mentioned so that I don't forget, because you said that at that time you'd grown a little bored, perhaps, of Kiki. But this is something that I've heard you say time and time again, and yet you continue to bring Kiki back to life. So what is your relationship with this part that, is it fair to say, made you a global superstar?
Well, I don't think I'm a global superstar.
I'm calling you that.
Okay.
Is it fair to say that you have a up and down relationship with Kiki, or how would you describe this long-standing relationship?
I love Kiki. I love the character, and I love Herb. But, you know, I wasn't so famous that I couldn't redefine myself. And I think it was around 2006. You know Perez Hilton, right? And so he was a big fan of Kiki and Herb. And he wanted to promote us and, like, produce us on a national tour. And I thought, okay, if this happens, if Perez Hilton becomes our champion and we go on a national tour, that's it. I'm going to be famous as Kiki, and I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. And we were going to LA to play his 30th birthday that weekend, and our producers were like, you know, maybe we can make the announcement when you're in LA for his party. And I had about 45 minutes to make up my mind, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I mean, I love being the character, but I like doing other things too. And as a person who has a lot of interests, people love it so much. But I can only have so many things in my headspace at once.
To have this character that you can embody that makes people so happy, that is a touch point of people's happiness, that's rare and really powerful as a performer. And it's one of the many things I really love about you, is that ability to make people happy. I wish more people had that ability.
Well, I can also make people really miserable. My mood, my friends are like, whatever mood you're in, when you walk into a room, everybody else is in that mood after that. So that's why I spend a lot of time alone.
What mood are you in today?
I'm in a good mood today.
You are in a good mood.
I just finished this amazing run at the Carlisle, which yesterday people kept asking me, how was it? And finally last night I was, cuddled up on my couch with my best girlfriend, and she goes, how are you feeling? How did it go? And I just looked at her and I said, it was perfect. Like, I don't have anything bad to say about it, and I don't trust that I don't have anything bad to say about it, but I can't think of anything bad to say about it. I just loved it. Well, but I love performing at Joe's Pub too. I mean, the only reason I do anything other than Joe's Pub is so people know to come see me at Joe's Pub. My dream is 4 nights a week for 3 months, a month's off, then have it just go and do that until I die.
I like that you give yourself that month off, though. I think too many people don't strike that work-life balance once they find success. I think it's very American, this idea of, well, now that I've gained this new level, I have to create this rigor around it, as opposed to recognizing and honing the gift and saying, actually, if I find some balance, that then will sustain me, as opposed to just hitting gas.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing I like to do more than nothing. I mean, I love to do nothing, but that's when you get your best ideas.
Yeah.
And also, my ideas aren't, for the most part, because I don't act really in plays. I mean, the things that I do are self-generated. Yeah. So I need the time to think about those things. I'm not a careerist per se. I just like to do what I like to do. We sold out Carnegie Hall, and I left the next week to go pursue my MA at St. Martin's College. That wasn't a very smart career move. But then when it was over, I didn't have any money, so they were like, would you like to do Broadway? And I was like, okay, great, because I have to pay some bills. And so I did that, and then we did one more Carnegie Hall concert after that. And then we didn't perform for another 10, however many years it was. So I'm more than happy. I'm a Scorpio moon. I'm happy to walk away from anything.
Okay, so to go back to Shortbus, I am curious about that orgy scene in particular.
Yes.
It's one I revisit often. There is I believe, like an ancillary documentary that gets into the making of the film and specifically the technical aspects of creating that orgy. I mean, I'm fascinated by unsimulated sex in film in general.
Or even in the world.
Certainly.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. But in this film, it strikes me as particularly interesting, sort of creating, and this is the work of John and everyone involved, in sort of creating comfort for all involved to be able to do this act on screen in which they are acting, but they're not. And I think that's one of the provocative things about this film is how it implicates you, the viewer, in saying how much of this is quote unquote real. And then to take it a level deeper, what is real, right? What is the idea of what is real? What do you recall of shooting that orgy?
Well, first of all, there were no intimacy coordinators back then like there are now. So I think that there was maybe there was a lot of negotiation going on, but I was not going to be having sex on screen. I mean, the people in the film, many of them were in relationships. PJ and Paul, they were lovers. And so in the orgy scene, people that were having sex were lovers, or they, were into each other or whatever. Obviously, it wasn't a problem for them. But what was interesting, because I was in that scene, I was there observing the whole thing. The lighting on the set was not LED back then. It was that hot light. So you got all these people in there. And I mean, I'm sure they prepared themselves, but there was butt sex, there was vaginal sex, there was, three ways, blowjobs, everything happening. The Garden of Earthly Delights. But let me tell you something, under that light, it was real. The smell was visceral. How vivid.
So you have a song that closes out the film, and I love this song so much. It means so much to me. In the song, you sing, quote, "As the last breath begins, contently take it in, 'cause we all get it in the end. And as the last act begins, you'll find your demons your best friend, and we all get it in the end." And I'm wondering how you interpret those lyrics that have stuck with me for years.
Well, what if I tell you and it just destroys your illusion of what the lyrics mean? I mean, that's the danger of saying anything. But I'll just say this. You find your demons your best friend. I feel like being trans is the grain of sand in my oyster that's turned me into a pearl. So your demon, the thing that may torture you the most, if you find a way to make peace with that and either grow through it or grow into it or grow around it, that is how you evolve as a person, how you gain self-respect, how you gain self-knowledge, and how you, I think, make a rich life for yourself.
You are a pearl.
Oh, thank you. I'm wearing them.
You are close friends with Jonathan Anderson, and I was thinking, did we sat next to one another? I think at the Loewe show, not the Dior show. But I did see you at the.
I think it was the last. Was it the final Loewe show?
Well, it was, but it wasn't yet announced.
Right. But you knew and I knew.
Yeah, and so I feel like you and I were exchanging some glances throughout, knowing the heightened emotion present in the room.
I was so happy I was seated next to you.
I was so happy I was seated next to you. I couldn't believe you knew who I was. That really took me aback. But anyway, in October, you attended the Christian Dior Women's Wear Spring-Summer 2026 show. Dior, for many, epitomizes femininity. And I know for a lot of people, you being there meant a lot. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what it meant for you to be there at Jonathan Anderson's debut Dior Women's Wear show.
I was seated 3 seats from Jonathan Bailey and did not realize it. But I thought it was just such a happy day, you know. His family was there, Paul was there, and it was a beautiful, beautiful show. And whatever it means to other people is nice. For me, it meant a lot because I was proud and I was honored to be there, and I just couldn't believe I was sitting there across from Brigitte Macron in her dark crystal wig, and and Anna Wintour and Johnny Depp, and I was like, they're like the waxworks in Sunset Boulevard. When are they going to get out their cards and start talking about their silent film careers? Because they look like people made out of wax.
I want to ask you about your thoughts on where we as an LGBTQ plus community stand. And to figure out the framework of that question, I guess I would put it to you that it's kind of obvious how many forces are working against us at the moment. So then my natural inclination is to then go, okay, well, what's bringing you joy amidst this? But that also framework to me is a little bit slightly insincere these days. There's just something about the idea that people need to be forced to find joy somewhere that, I don't know, something tells me that that's no longer the question.
Right.
And so to try and go a layer deeper or to find some sort of new place to excavate the conversation, I guess I want to ask you, what good do you think is being done for our movement right now? And I don't think I'm speaking on a legislative level.
Well, first of all, do you mind if I take this sweater off?
Due to my line of questioning?
Yes. It's a very interesting time. First of all, it does suck because for most of the life of people that are younger than me, they've been on an arc toward freedom. They're not used to like give, take, you know, the up and down of it. I've been alive since the 1960s, and so it's been one step forward, two steps back. But I would say that it seems like it's the worst it could be, as bad as it could get. But it's been worse. I mean, and for me, when Reagan was in office and there, it wasn't like, oh, they're being neglectful. It's like they literally wanted us to die. And so now they literally want us to disappear. But I know we're going to get through this. What is annoying is that we have to get through it. And it's just such a manufactured situation that is created specifically to enrich horrible people. That's the only reason it exists. So that's one thing. But I think what the good thing, if there's a good thing that will come out of it, and I think this is across the board. It's not just about LGBT rights or trans rights. It's about intersectionality between immigrants, the DEI. It's all tied to, you know, the same thing, white supremacy. And I think what the good thing is that it's got us all talking to each other. Mm. I think there has to be a correction in our culture where we spend more time with other people. I feel isolated. I don't think that's because I'm just getting older. I think it's because A, I like to be alone, but B, I don't live near my family. People see their family all the time, but I have my best friends that live close to me. But I can't imagine what it's like if you're a young person who never even learned how to be around other people. That's a skill. And it's also something that you have to get past because it doesn't start out with you being comfortable in people. When I used to go to Studio 54 and I was fresh off the truck, the turnip truck, as my pappy used to say, I went with my friend and we would sit in that VIP area, and I would say, let's just laugh and pretend like we're having a really fascinating conversation. So we'd be really animated and saying, I don't know what the fuck, to each other. So all of a sudden, we looked engaging, like friendly people that you might want to talk to. And before we knew it, you know, people were talking about us. But you can't do that if you're sitting alone. And your way of approaching the world is either black or white. Either you're fighting for something, or you're telling somebody off, or you're standing for something. It's not important to stand for anything. It's important to stand with. Standing for is a very isolating thing.
Okay, my last question for you. At the 30th anniversary of the Performance Arts Space PS 122 in 2011, you said this about your mother's absence, quote, "I'm very sad that she couldn't be here tonight, but if it wasn't for my family and the rage they engendered in me, I wouldn't be here." And I'm wondering what you meant by that, because that quote has stuck with me for some time. And you God it when I started to read this quote.
Well, lots happened since 2011, but I'm reminded of the final words of Oscar Wilde when he said, it's a struggle, I'm paraphrasing, it's a struggle to the death between myself and this wallpaper, this hideous wallpaper. I feel like, you know, my relationship with my father was a struggle of wills, his will and my will versus each other from the time I was young, because boys don't do that. Why? He would say these blanket statements to me about things that I did or what have you, and I would ask him why, and he never gave me a good reason. Well, you know what? If he had given me a good reason, maybe I would have seen things his way, but I never did. And so my father did wonderful, wonderful things for me. He got me braces. He put me through college. I didn't have student loans to pay off. Most people didn't of my generation. That just happened later, after Reagan. But he gave me all the tools I needed to be successful, including this dogged determination to not let anyone convince me of anything that I didn't think was true. And so, because I took the stance of being who I was, it made for a lot of friction. And because my mother was married to my father, she said, listen, if I ever have to make a choice between your sister and you and your father, I'm going to choose your father, because I'm going to be with that man for the rest of my life, and you two can go off and live your lives. And I was like, fair enough. So when my father died, I mean, I had years where I didn't speak to my mother. When she said people with AIDS brought it on themselves, which was what all the Christians were saying back then, I just hung up the phone and didn't speak to her for over a year. She used to call me and torture me about things that she saw on Facebook. I was like, you have 3 strikes and then you're out. And I just things happened that there were years where we didn't speak, but we eventually did speak. And then after my father died, we just became best friends. We had so much fun. She came to the opening night of Only an Octave Apart, and that was one of her best nights ever. I took her to the opera at Lincoln Center for the first time. We just had a wonderful time. I was with her when she passed. I think the reason I was with her when she passed was because, I mean, she loved my sister, but we were very similar. And so it made me who I am to have to be struggling with them, because I cared. I cared what they thought, but I also wasn't going to let that determine, they taught me not to be a liar. So, and then they insisted I lie to them. to make them comfortable. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting paradox, but I just chose to find community, which I did, and to figure out how to be myself, which I did. And in a way, it's a tribute to the way that they raised me. But it was very painful a lot of the time.
A beautiful note to end on.
Pain!
Justin Vivian Bond, thank you so much. I'm wondering, how did this go for you?
Oh, it was fun. You know, I was so nervous because you interview a lot of famous people. And I feel like I tranifested this interview. Well, I got the MacArthur, and then I was named a doctor, and people were like, you have a really good, what are you going to tranifest next? And I was like, well, and I said to my publicist, she's like, what's one of your dream things? I was like, oh, I want to be on Shut Up Evan. And so she said, I'll see what I can do. And then my other dream that has yet to come true is to have a royal title, because I want to be a viscountess, which means I'll probably have to get married, which I don't believe in. So I'm still struggling with it. But if you find out that I have a royal title before too long, you'll know why.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'll be tuned in. Well, thank you for taking the time to be here. I feel really strongly about this conversation, and I hope to have you back, and I hope to see you more in everyday life.
Well, come see me at my show.
I would love to come see you at Show Joe's Pub. We will include a link to get tickets to that show.
But also, I would like to see you more in everyday life, too, and not at magazine parties.
Oh, my gosh. Well, thank you so much.